Cool.
get started.
Okay. Right. This is what date is this today? It's a bit of a blur. The 28th of November, is that right? Is that
That's right.
true on your
That's
end?
right. And it's a blur because congratulations are due to you. I hope you're getting enough sleep after having a baby.
Yes. Yeah, it is. It's been a very intense 24 hours, but yeah, I am indeed a father as of 24 hours ago. So, yeah,
Very
pretty
nice.
good feeling actually.
Very nice.
Thanks, man. How you been, Yen?
Good. Good. Everything's good on my end.
I will. I'll do the. No, no, it's really good to hear. I'll do the introductions and start the show then.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Dr. Kapil Amarasinga. I am a advisor and public face for the Particle Project, which is a privacy project. Joining me is Yanachar, who happens to be a public face for the PivX project, which is also a privacy project in the sort of cryptocurrency ecosystem. Also, just joining us on stage right now is Ruben, who is also very much a public face for the Firo project, which is another sort of wonderful privacy project and cryptocurrency. And also, hopefully, joining us on stage will be Ravaga Howell from the Xano project, who is sort of our sort of special guest today on what we call the Privacy Roundtable. We finally have an agreed name on that. Is that right, guys?
That's right.
Sorry. And I know that we are holding the topic today on Binance. There's so much that's been happening, hasn't there? Like Binance, Bittrex shuts down, and then Binance in literally 1 week. This place is a never-ending drama, as it were, but really interesting. Has really interesting implications for privacy coins, particularly in the overall regulatory sphere. So I was going to say, Ian, your thoughts. I was hoping you could maybe start a little bit with us on
Sure,
this.
sure. I'll kick
Get
it
your
off.
perspective.
Kick it off, and so the crackdown on Binance, of course, came in the U.S. and I guess I'm a U.S. representative here. It was a joint effort with multiple agencies, the Department of Justice. There was a big press conference. Some may have seen it. I don't know. It was half an hour long, and it had two cabinet members involving it up on stage. And they announced the crackdown. They involves a really big fine, like 4.3 billion, going from memory, and it also includes fines against individuals, including CZ, the CEO, now former CEO of Binance. And the press conference was really quite something. For those who didn't see it, you can watch a video of it online. Again, it had two cabinet members who are very high-ranking U.S. government officials involved. It had the Attorney General, who represents the Department of Justice, and Janet Yellen, who represents the Treasury Department. She's the Secretary of the Treasury. And they talked up a lot how, they were in, the meaning of this, the very high level of the fine, and the admission, on the part of CZ and on the part of Binance, as a legal entity, to felony charges. Now, I think, and Dr. Cap, I'd be interested in your take on the repercussions of that. But my take of how people took that is they saw it as a bit of overreach, because Binance, okay, maybe they accused him of violating the Bank Secrecy Act, which is this, in my mind, controversial thing going back to 1970, that you have to notify the government of all these financial transactions. But that doesn't really resonate all that much with Binance's customers or people in general. I mean, what people mostly just don't want to be cheated in the space, right? And it didn't come out that Binance had cheated any of its customers. And I think that, coming down so hard on them and has made CZ into something of a martyr. That's my reading of the way people have responded. I mean, he was a more controversial figure before this happened than he is after it. People seem as they worried about Binance, maybe doing a rug pull or something, and that went away with these actions because it didn't come out that they had cheated their customers. And so that's kind of would be my take, I guess, Dr. Cap, on the like the situation with Binance, and the news keeps trickling out. They CZ, who actually he's a citizen, as I understand it, of the UAE in Canada. I think he has like dual passports, but the UAE doesn't have an extradition treaty with the U.S. So he could go to the UAE and not be extradited. He voluntarily came to the U.S., and then the judge told him he couldn't leave the U.S. until he gets, sentenced. I think it's early next year. Um, and so this kind of information keeps trickling out about the case, and they may seek, some prison time for CZ, which I think will, in my mind, that will add to his martyrdom. Um, but how it impacts privacy coins, I believe, is part of this settlement. In addition to the fine, in addition to the criminal charges and confessing, pleading guilty to felonies, is kind of intense oversight of Binance itself. So they have to report on they have to go back and file reports on what they see as suspicious activity in the past. They have to subject themselves to monitoring by the government. And it's generally accepted that going forward, they're going to be much more invasive in their analysis of the people who are using Binance, and even some retroactive invasive investigation. And that runs counter to the ethos of privacy coins. We tend to believe you have privacy in your personal effects. Your money is yours, and you don't have to share the information. And we're going to have some conflict. There may be privacy coins delisted. Who knows? There's various worries going forward, and that's how it impacts the privacy space. That would be my take.
I think it's, if you want my take on it,
Yes.
I think the whole thing's really interesting. I think the first thing that really struck me was that CZ voluntarily pleaded guilty to some of these charges laid out against him and essentially came to a plea deal.
Yep.
In terms of the ins and outs of the case that they're pursuing, I don't know a huge amount. I've only got like little scraps and bits of trickles here and there. One thing am aware of is that, or one of the things that I'm aware of that's been floated around within the space, if you follow certain accounts and that have been looking closely at this, one of the things that I'm kind of aware of is that, Binance Global is a separate entity from Binance US. So customers of Binance US can only trade a very limited number of assets within the Binance US platform that are kind of compliant with US laws. Now, what has transpired, or certainly reading the little threads that have been sort of flipping through, is there have been exchanges by customer services representatives for Binance Global, which have basically said, that basically been leaked. And some of these are very high level, and I believe some of them include CZ himself, that basically go, just let's just going to, high profile US customers, just use a VPN to basically access Binance Global and you'll be able to set up an account. I don't think it's CZ himself, but certainly some of their reps have. So there's some pretty damning logs of laws pertaining to the SEC's overreach. I think, there you go, I've just let my own view go, SEC's overreach on US citizens and their financial activity. But certainly some rules around, what US citizens can do were being breached. And I think, I don't know the full story here, but I have to say, it surprises me that they pled guilty, and it suggests to me that, I'm not CZ. I don't know what he thinks like, but if I'm putting myself in his shoes, as it were, I would be going, okay, is the benefit of me fighting this thing greater than the risks? Are the benefits of me pleading guilty greater than the risks? And if he's pled guilty, then something has made him go, I think the benefits of pleading guilty outweigh the risks. And I think he's looked at the plea deal and gone, okay, this is probably the best possible outcome. I met CZ many years ago when they launched Binance in Journey. I did. And yeah, I'll keep my opinion to myself. He's a very reserved guy. He is a very reserved guy. I was in East London actually. It was when they did the launch of Binance in Jersey. They announced that. I was very fortunate to physically be there, present, and sort of got to meet him. But my impression of him is he's a very reserved guy, and he's a very pragmatic guy. I think whatever decision he made here was a pragmatic one, and I think whatever decisions he makes from here are pragmatic. On the other side of that, I think the US government has made a pragmatic decision in the sense that if they shut Binance down, it is the largest centralized exchange by trading volume globally. There are a lot of customer funds locked up in there, including US customer funds, and if they were to rail down on it, a lot of people would lose a lot of money very rapidly. And then I think there would have been a bigger reckoning in terms of, well, the SEC is definitely not protecting anyone in that scenario. So I think there's been a sense of compromise from both sides. But the clue to what I think is, it bugs me, the idea that if you're born a US citizen and then you decide to live in another country, that once you're above a certain earning bracket, you have to pay income tax to the US. I find that, if you're not ordinarily resident in a country and you're not working in a country and you're ordinary resident in another country, yes, you may have citizenship elsewhere, but then really, is that fair for the laws of that country to extend to you in that in a completely different jurisdiction? What is the nature of that? And I think that is the underlying issue here. I think it's actually quite an anti-libertarian rule or philosophy of enforcement. I certainly don't think that permits freedom. So that's my personal take.
Right. Well, it certainly is anti-libertarian. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it kind of runs spirit to this idea of adventure, discovery, and freedom, that your host citizenship or your host, birthright citizenship can exert such a wide-reaching influence on you in that way. Yeah.
Well, I found it a little disappointing, actually, that they pleaded guilty rather than fighting it. But like you say, it had to have been a practical decision. And I mean, look, like that press, meeting. There were two. The Secretary of Treasury was there. The Attorney General was there. Think of the resources they were bringing against Binance. And what we're finding, and you mentioned the SEC, it's definitely happening with the SEC. They launched this investigation, and they have like immense resources to like attack people and companies. And what do you do against just a relentless assault? Whether or not the law is behind them, right? They can launch a withering assault where they issue subpoenas. You have to answer like legal questions. Wasn't the cost to Ripple of what seems to have just been like a completely flawed attack just really high in terms of legal costs? I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars. And so you have to think he was looking at that, and even apart from the legal questions, just countering that attack would lead him to make his decision. And I think that's a sad state of affairs when you.
I see Ruben. Ruben, you got your hand up here. I know you've been really patient with us, so thank you. Just want you to say what you got to say.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm Ruben. You guys definitely
Sorry about that, by the
way. I'm the project steward of Firo. And yeah, actually, I mean, I've also met CZ, and I think we were one of the very early coins that were listed on Binance, like back in 2000. Oh, but when was it? Like maybe 2018 or so. So pretty early, 2017
Oh,
maybe.
nice.
And so I've had the opportunity to kind of like see how Binance grew, and I mean, okay, putting aside the legality and whatnot, I mean, and whether I'm not one to hero worship, but I do have to say that Binance has done a lot, and CZ has done a lot in making crypto much more mainstream and much more acceptable, in the public opinion, right? And I also think that on the one hand, I am also quite certain that in pursuit of growth, especially like the way they were set up was kind of like, we're going to try to play in the legal gray area and just try to grow as fast as possible and then legitimize. And some people see that as like, oh, that's the wrong way to do it. But if you take a look at so many other startups today, like if you take a look at like Uber,
Right.
right?
Uber's a great
Or you take a
example.
look at, yeah, and the other, the Airbnb, right? It's like you get to the size that you need to do, and in a way, that's what Bitcoin is trying to do, right? We are trying to outpace growth before the regulators can keep up, and therefore once we are big enough, then we have the power to kind of like deal with whatever that comes then, right? So on the one hand, it's like I do think that definitely, like when you talk about money laundering, the way they've painted it is also very like anti-China, and because like although CZ, he probably was born in China and then moved to Canada when he was 12 years old. The fact that they had to keep on mentioning it, the fact that they keep on saying he's Chinese national or no Chinese born or something like that, and I find it's almost kind of like racist, right? And I was also very disappointed to see all the other exchanges like gloating. Like when the announcement came out, Coinbase started like gloating. Even Kraken also was like, "Oh yeah, gloating." But I also can understand because they had to play by the rules for a lot longer, and watch while Binance kind of leapfrog them because they're much more flexible, right? So I'm very sure, like I don't think it's very different, like than an FTX scenario where this guy was out to like defraud customers. Here is more like I just want to get big. I don't really care about the laws. Crypto is supposed to be decentralized. We don't have a headquarters and all of that. So I think the intention is different here. And while you guys may think like, oh, it's sad that CZ is stepping down, I do think that the mountain of evidence definitely, I think it's quite clear. I mean, there's so many people like in the space that knows that this happened, especially in the early days of Binance. But then they tried to legitimize, they hired all these regulators, but they're going after them for the previous stuff that they did while they were still kind of in the Wild West. And that's kind of unfortunate. But him resigning, him reaching a settlement also means that this thing is settled, right? It's not going to like drag on and this thing looming over our head that this thing is going to get shut down completely. Whether this will pan out good or bad in the long run, I mean, we yet to see. But at the same time, as a former lawyer, I'm glad to see regulatory certainty. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it opens up the way. I really hate saying this, but overall, I do see it as a big positive for the space. And it comes down to what you said about regulatory clarity. It is the largest exchange. I don't know if it's going to continue to be the largest exchange, but it has now fallen under US oversight, is my kind of take on this. One point I want to make, which I found really interesting to compare and contrast, is the fate of Bittrex, which shut down pretty much in its entirety about a week or two ago. And I think, a lot of people who've been in this space for some time have seen that coming. I found it a bit of a shame because it's one of the oldest exchanges as well. and certainly going back to 2016, 2017, it was, the second biggest exchange after Poloniex. And it's really funny to see what's happened. Well, not funny. It's kind of sad to see the trajectory and changes to Poloniex and Bittrex, but Bittrex in particular, because I always got the sense, their US operations were headquartered in Seattle, and Bittrex was clearly a project in terms of the way they ran that, I could see that they were trying to play by the rules, and unfortunately, they couldn't remain competitive. And the simple truth is exactly as you said. Exchanges like Binance, they outcompeted. They implemented zero fees. They listed so many different coins, had so much flexibility, and Binance really came into its own from 2017, and from 2018, 19 onwards, it really took over. And you could really see that difference in volumes. The volume shot up on Binance, and they really fell to relative zero on Bittrex. And certainly after, and in spite of Bittrex trying to play by the rules, the SEC still went after them. And then you saw the shutdown of Bittrex US, and that destroyed consumer confidence, which effectively, and liquidity access for a big chunk of Bittrex, which ultimately led to the closure of Bittrex Global. So I see two compare and contrast stories. One of a movement. I'll call Binance a movement that I think had grown too big to fail, and I think CZ was successful to an extent in getting Binance to the size where an entire government of a superpower had to negotiate a plea deal rather than just go full on, we're shutting you down. I think that's quite an achievement, no matter how you look at it. One thing I'm really curious to kind of get your thoughts on. I don't know if Ravaga's back, but I know.
No, I think Ravaga's given up. Yeah, his
Okay.
I think people are having issues joining, unfortunately. Yeah.
Fair enough. At least we've still got the recording. I think one of the things I want to kind of get from you and Yen is, you're both listed on Binance, and you're both privacy coins, and the broader global framework has been going after privacy coins. So how do you feel this is potentially going to affect your projects and your ongoing status with Binance?
So this is actually like very relevant, but I feel that just thinking that it's a Binance issue only is kind of short-sighted. Not saying that you're short-sighted, but like those people who think it's just a Binance issue is short-sighted, because whatever this happens at Binance is going to ripple effect across all the other exchanges, unless you want to remain to be like a trade ogre or something like that, right? Now, Binance have actually approached us, and their regulatory division basically said that, what are you planning to do about privacy? Because MiCA regulations, which is this market and crypto assets regulations that is coming into force middle of next year, there is
right?
It is European, but at the same time, just imagine if you have to like wipe off your entire European market.
Oh, right. Oh, absolutely. Right.
Not only that, it also sets, it's like, why should I bother to kind of like maintain two things? They basically intimated to say that, if you can't solve this, we are going to delist you, right? And this also applies to not just us, but other privacy coins as well. We know they've reached out to Zcash. I don't think they've reached out to Monero, because I don't think Monero is going to give a crap. I don't know whether they've reached out to PivX. I just spoke to them. They said they have a contact with PivX as well. But so we were like in a very difficult position, and we kind of like went to our community. We proposed something, but before I talk about how we kind of solved it and whether it would be solved in the end, maybe let Yanachar speak on what you have been facing, whether you've been dealing with similar issues.
Oh, yes. The last that I heard, we hadn't been contacted. I imagine, we probably will be. My take on it, and I kind of agree with where you're going with what you're saying, Ruben, which is it's a bigger issue. Um, I think the goal would be to stay on centralized exchanges as long as possible, to the degree we don't have to sacrifice the privacy of our coins. I mean, if there's a way we can do something that's a check the box capability, we should do it to stay on centralized exchanges as long as possible. But the end goal probably needs to be to move to DEXs, decentralized exchanges. And I say that somewhat with like an American perspective. What they charged Binance with, getting back to that, was the Bank Secrecy Act. And the Bank Secrecy Act in the U.S., it was a 1970-ish thing where banks have to disclose information on customers. If there's something suspicious, they have to tell the government. If it's over a certain amount, they have to tell the government, so forth and so on. And this remains controversial and was controversial because it to a degree runs counter to what we have in the Constitution, the Fourth Amendment, which gives you privacy and personal effects. So the U.S. has as fundamental law privacy and your personal effects. Nobody, barring a warrant from a judge, somebody has to make a case, this person is probably breaking the law, and then the judge can issue a warrant. They can come in, search your house or your drawers, anything. But absent that, they can't come in and search your personal effects. And how they evaded that with the Bank Secrecy Act was they said, well, there's no presumption of privacy when you go to the bank. You go to the bank and you make your deposit of $10,000 or whatever's over the threshold. You're already letting the bank know, and the person taking your money. There's no presumption of privacy in that, and the judicial system upheld that at the time. So the way that we need to go forward is we need to take away that presumption of no privacy. And we do that, at least from the U.S. perspective, with a DEX. There's a presumption of privacy there. This is my personal effects, and there shouldn't be an investigation absent the process of getting a warrant for it. So I think for Americans, we really need, and probably for everyone to a greater or lesser degree, we need to move towards DEXs. And Dr. Cap, what you all are doing with the basic swap is just fantastic. And I think there's other good DEXs out there. Decred has one. There need to be more DEXs, and people need to use DEXs. And this is a good juncture to steer that way. That would be my take.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny. As you were speaking, I was like, this naturally leads into a conversation about DEXs. Just to give to those in the audience who aren't aware, the Particle project as a privacy project has two major products, which is the Particle Marketplace, which is a KYC eBay style marketplace platform where anyone can be a buyer or seller of real world goods and services online using cryptocurrency. We use our own native token, the PART token, which is a privacy coin using RootCT. And that is also coupled. But one of the things we realized in building that was that, one token isn't enough. One token isn't good enough. You're always going to, it's a singular technology, and we actually, getting access to our marketplace could be made easier in some senses, but there's a lot more to it than that. That is a practical consideration. We built something called Basic Swap DEX, which I would consider is probably the world's most anonymous and private decentralized exchange. The only DEX in the world that supports bidirectional Monero atomic swaps, and it is a cross-chain atomic swap DEX. And a lot of our focus in building our DEX is essentially making it so private that our swaps, on a number of our pairings, they don't look like swaps, they just look like one-way gifts. And I think this is, sorry to put the plug for Basic Swap, but, we do the Privacy Roundtable. PivX, you do excellent work with sort of zero-knowledge proofs and masternode setups. And Firo, congratulations for sort of making Lelantus Spark happen, because that is another avenue of privacy tech. It's a shame we don't have Ravaga with us still, because he would have talked about Xano and the interesting updates that they're making in atomic swap work as well, and certainly their own sort of privacy coin, which is Xano. But going back to what I was saying, DEX, having good quality, easily accessible, open, decentralized exchanges is the way forward. I've said this in the past, if you build your DEXs the right way, when CBDCs come, and they will come, then, certainly I look at our DEX and go, we will be able to integrate support for that. And as I sort of mentioned, if you've got a level of privacy that makes two-way swaps look like one-way gifts, then then the pragmatic application of laws from a singular nation, I question whether they can be pragmatically applied in a meaningful way. And I think the conversation will shift from, well, can we ban this KEX, or can we regulate this KEX, or can we fine this centralized exchange? I think the conversation will be shift from that to, well, are we going to actively restrict the individual's access to specific applications or technology? I know that there are certainly policies in place that regulate that for sectors like nuclear arms and nuclear energy, but should that be applied to privacy tech? I don't know. I don't think so personally, but
I don't think so either.
I don't think so. Yeah. But certainly I see that as the future regulatory battle and the future legal questions and the future legal framework push. I see states that feel threatened by truly decentralized exchanges pushing to actively ban the development of such technology. And we've seen this with end-to-end encryption in the, every so often, we've had this recently in the UK, you've had an attempt to pass law that, would potentially ban true end-to-end encryption in the UK. And that didn't quite go to plan because people who understand what end-to-end encryption is from a security perspective actually spoke up and said, this is a stupid idea, it will undermine your national security. But at the same time, I can see, centralized nation states defined by physical borders coming together and trying to push this sort of framework against DEXs and such technology. And I've argued in the past that I suspect we'll see a division of our economies into what I call the public liquidity sphere, which will be CBDC driven and Bitcoin driven, and the private liquidity sphere, which will be driven by privacy coins interacting on DEXs, utilizing truly decentralized privacy focused marketplaces and other messaging services and other privacy focused tools. So I think you'll see over time the emergence of two different independent, somewhat interacting economies. And I do think ultimately that's the way forward for serious privacy projects. It is also why, I enjoy talking to you guys. Never mind like learning things, learning little bits and getting different perspectives, but also because it brings us all together.
Right. So just to be clear, your vision for when a CBDC comes out is it will be integrated with basic swap DEX?
Yeah, pretty much. I shouldn't be so open about that, but if you look at what CBDC...
I hadn't thought of that.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I know, but this is exactly how I see this. So if you look at the technology that CBDCs are being built on, it's essentially using Ethereum. A lot of it is using Ethereum-based smart contract technology. Now, we've done the work. We've done the groundwork here. It is possible to do Ethereum Monero atomic swaps. So Elizabeth Banks, aka Newton Twitter, NOT, she did the proof of concept. She proved that you can do an atomic swap for Monero and Ethereum. We saw that at Monerotopia.
She demoed it at Monerotopia.
Yeah, we were there. We were sat next to each other. It was great. And after that, our guys got talking to her, and we kind of worked out that actually it would be possible to implement, Ethereum Monero atomic swaps into it. It is possible. It would require development of a slightly new protocol. Wouldn't necessarily. It would still be pretty private, probably not as private as some of the other protocols that exist. So, if the take-home point was that on the Ethereum side of things, you'd see it would require a smart contract execution, so you'd see evidence that a contract has occurred, but you wouldn't necessarily see what it was for. But it's possible to have Ethereum atomic swaps on our DEX. And my kind of take-home message is, if you look at our DEX infrastructure, we're using an intermediary token-free data layer, which is called the SMSG network. It's an end-to-end encrypted data layer that's just designed, that's kind of optimized for execution of smart contracts off-chain. And that's actually how our atomic swaps work on our particular DEXs. You know, whenever you're doing a PivX Firo or a PivX part or a part Monero swap, the contract aspect of it is occurring off-chain on this E2E end-to-end encrypted data layer, and then you're just getting sort of hashes of the signatures of that swap occurring, but then you're separating a lot of the time and space aspects of it. So this is why I say it looks like a one-way swap. But without getting into the technicalities of it, you know, because of the architecture of the DEX, essentially any digital currency could be integrated into it. And that's what makes me sort of optimistic that we'll see CBDCs when they come out. I suspect, you know, this doesn't even have to be us. This could be any talented developers could look at them and just go, could look at what we've done and go, how do we do that? I'm quite optimistic about that. So
I'm actually more pessimistic.
So, I mean, what's your take, Ruben, on the CBDC?
I mean, we talk about, oh, you know, it's like it's based on the same technology as Ethereum, but it's probably not going to be built on Ethereum, right? It's going to be probably some permission version that they can, you know, put in sanctions, they can lock it down and stuff like that. I mean, that to me, there's a fine balance to say that, you know, they want it to be free enough so that people would not worry about using it, but still locked down enough for them to exert power like how they do sanctions, right? And as CBDCs become more into play, so I feel like, oh yeah, if you work out some way to do it, you know, I feel like there's going to be some way to stop it, right? And I think like with the, I also just wanted to when I was listening to Dr. Cup, you know, I was hearing this, oh, DEXs are the solution. I would caution to say that not all DEXs are the same, especially when it comes to those types, those like smart contract types, like for example, like TorChain or like Maya. And I'm not saying anything bad about them, but they are subject to very different, not only technical, but regulatory risks that may make them more susceptible to certain things. Because
you mean because they don't use atomic swaps because they have a separate cryptocurrency?
There is you know, there are smart contracts, there are validators that, you know, maintain the chain for the different versions of the chain, and there's a voting mechanism for which coins can be on their stuff or not, right? Right. And most of the time, the interfaces to these things are, there's this one front end. Of course, you know, there probably is multiple front ends, but there'll be this one front end like Uniswap. You know, how many of you like use an alternate Uniswap? Everyone's just going to use Uniswap, right? No one goes to, let me find this weird Uniswap front end, right? And there is obligation on the front end, and there is censorship on Uniswap on the front end at the same time. And at the same time, like you take a look at TorChain, I think when they were having, when there was some issue about money being laundered through them, you know, basically they just disabled their entire front end, right? And if you are the validator, especially when the validator is determined by coin holding and stuff like that, you know how this is kind of, like, I always find this type of things like a bit of a circle jerk, right? Like you distribute it to your friends, your buddies, and they all become like validators together. Like, you know, it's not like a fairly distributed, right? So all of you like, and most of the validators, you know, tend to be, you know each other, right? So when it comes to push comes to shove, you know, you tell me, am I really going to, like, you know, host this? Am I really not going to implement this and risk going to jail, right? So I think unlike where, like, say something like atomic DEX or basic swap DEX or decrypt DEX, where it's more atomic swap based, when it's more P2P, there's no, I mean, the front end is like a client sitting on your computer. That's much harder to stop, especially when the orders are being placed by the user themselves rather than being held in some sort of smart contract and stuff like that, right? So I think that's interesting, but it also detracts from usability, because it means that if you want to do market making, you want to do and I saw Decrypt DEX starting to introduce their own bots for them to do arbitrage from their DEX on and centralized exchange, which is a great move. And I feel that the problem with that is that then you have to keep your computer on and running your bots with your funds kind of like exposed-ish, right? At least like placing the orders and stuff like that. Yeah.
No, I think that's actually a great point. I think what you said is spot on. It is not just about DEXs, it's actually about looking at the underlying architecture of the DEX. Because building a truly private DEX, it's difficult. And as you said, a lot of Uniswap and Thorchain, and certainly Uniswap running on Ethereum, it uses smart contract execution, and it's smart contracts executed on a public blockchain. So all of that activity is publicly viewable. And I don't think those sorts of DEXs are going to be the future of privacy-based coins. I don't think they're going to have the safeguards in place that privacy-focused DEXs will.
Super convenient, though.
Oh yeah, no, they are wonderfully run. They are, and automated, AMM pooling liquidity. It's fantastic. It's a fantastic innovation. And what they've achieved for liquidity in cryptocurrency has been great. But certainly in terms of privacy, what you've described, you're spot on. It is an arms race. At the moment, I don't know how much individual governments know. I think we shouldn't underestimate every government on the planet. I think what I'm trying to say is I think CBDCs, it is potentially incorporatable. I'm not going to be so pessimistic to say as a government will think everything through, but I think if they're going to go ahead with CBDCs, then they're going to need to explore the technological landscape very thoroughly and think very carefully about how they implement things if they're going to achieve their specific set of intentions. Open the.
Oh, did Cop just, I don't know,
just
say open and then suddenly got cut off?
Yeah. I would add one thing to that while we're talking about the basic swap DEX. All listeners, it's really easy to download and get started with the basic swap DEX, and you can configure it to run any of the wallets that basic swap DEX works with. So if you go and download it, configure it to run with PivX and Firo, and then you'll have a PivX and a Firo wallet. It's actually a really easy way to get wallets set up for a number of privacy coins.
Yeah, really looking forward to when we don't have to run. I feel that one of the big issues with all these atomic swap bases is that a lot of times you have to maintain the entire node structure, infrastructure.
True. You need to run a node. Yeah. Yep, it's true.
Yeah,
it's true. It takes a while to set up, but it's such an empowering thing to have, right? Once you have the node, I mean, like you said, it's just software you're running on your computer, and you're talking directly to the blockchains. I don't know. I find it.
Yeah,
nice.
I like it. But I do hope that we do move to kind of ZKP type of light nodes where you can kind of prove the state, so you can maintain 100 chains or so, and then it's not too bad,
Right.
Yeah, no. I mean, we're working towards client support on our end, so that stuff is all in our roadmap, and we appreciate the trade-offs for that. I'm gonna just sort of pause on my end. I'm going to need to head out in about 5 minutes. I just want to change the topic of discussion, but keep it focused back onto Binance. My question here is, do you guys think this is ultimately good or bad for crypto? And I don't necessarily mean just as the technology, but for liquidity and the price. I would love to get your thoughts. And I do have some of my own, but I'll open the floor to you.
Well, I'm glad to go first. Whether the Binance action is good or bad for crypto? That's...
Yeah. Do you think it's...
I'll give a quick summary. I think there's two aspects to it. I think that there's an element of crypto that really needs to be above the laws of any single given country. I think the real empowering feature of crypto is that it becomes almost like a law of nature. So people can group together and form governments and do things to enact laws on how their citizens interact with crypto, but they shouldn't be going and changing the nature of crypto itself. The crypto, the way it runs, should be like a law of nature. I mean, it should be like gold. A government can pass a law that nobody can own gold privately, but they can't pass a law that changes the atomic structure of gold or where it's found or its materials properties. And I think that crypto should be in that same league and exist above the laws of any given legal jurisdiction. And then the legal jurisdictions dictate how their citizens interact with it. From that perspective, I think that it's if anything, it's a good thing. They're shaping crypto into something that exists outside the U.S. legal jurisdiction. And I think that there's an element of that that's good. There's a second element. I'm an American. I'm inside the U.S. jurisdiction. And I think that Americans should be more free to interact with crypto than they are. And I think from that perspective, it's a negative thing. They're coming down, they're complaining about using VPNs, they're complaining about Americans doing things with crypto that pretty much Americans just want to do. And the forces changing it seems to be coming from inside the government rather than from the people. That would be my take. And so I think from that perspective, it's a bad thing. Maybe bad for like within the American system, but good for the macro of crypto.
So, yeah, I mean, I think again, it's both good and bad. I mean, if you say overall, I'm just glad, at the beginning of a bull cycle, it's just good to get this shit resolved, right? We don't need another FTX kind of issue. But obviously,
well, unless
I think
you've been gored.
Yes, but after the thing that really worries me are the government monitors that are going to be installed within Binance. And you can't blame them as a regulator, as someone, they're less about growing the business. They're just saying, are you ticking the boxes, right? Like these people, they're just born to tick boxes. I come from a regulatory background, right? I help to draft my state's own laws, so I know how they think. But I guess, to me, beyond the Binance thing, what is actually more pertinent is that attack on privacy coins specifically because of MiCA. And I think that sometime next year, we are going to see a lot of high-profile privacy coin delistings. Like Monero probably would definitely go. Zcash, there is an ongoing discussion because our proposal has been already with exchange addresses, which is a kind of super transparent address, has been accepted by Binance, but there are other projects that don't want to take this route, or they're proposing other stuff that doesn't really make sense, that they're saying, oh, you should give your view key to the exchange, which is way, way worse, because that means the exchange now sees all your wallet activity, not just the ones that you are dealing with the exchange, right?
Right.
So I think it's going to be really, next year is going to be a huge battleground. And, some may say, oh, Ruben, you're copping out, you are kind of like pandering to regulators. No, it's just like there is the reality there, and you can't blame Binance, right? It's like, if the regulation is like that, what are they going to do? You expect them to just say, no, I'm not going to comply? No, they have to comply, right? the time to fight that fight in terms of fighting that regulation being passed into law, unfortunately has gotten passed, and that's unfortunately the way EU laws tend to go, where they're kind of like decided behind closed doors, and there's some consultation period, but generally like the average Joe doesn't really have much say in all these things, which is kind of unfortunate. So hopefully, my hope is that with this exchange addresses proposal and all that stuff, they manage to tick all the boxes and say, okay, we've done enough regulation in this area, and then they'll leave us alone. And obviously that gives us time to build up really good DEX infrastructure. And I do think that, while we say that, DEXs can solve everything, we have to realize that centralized exchanges are really good being that gateway between fiat and crypto, right? They are the only ones that, let's say, they can have a bank account, they can like swap in and out, you give you like, fiat dollars, or like even, for example, something like Binance Pay, where you can use in like, real retail stores in here and there and pay people like almost instantly, right? Like, yes, it's centralized, but because of its centralized nature and usability, it makes crypto so much more useful, right? So I think, of course, in an ideological sense, I'm against all this like centralized stuff, but there is still right now a continuing need, and I think it would be wrong to just say like, we don't need any centralized exchange, or screw Binance, we'll be okay with Coinbase and Kraken. I'm like, no, I think Coinbase and Kraken have bigger fish to fry, and if regulators crack down and start saying like, hey, Euro has implemented it, why don't we? They're gonna follow suit as well, because they cannot afford fighting this battle. So yeah. Anyway, I said enough on that.
No, I think you both made valid points. I definitely agree. I think there will be increasing pressure on privacy projects to either comply with the regulatory needs of centralized exchanges or risk delisting outright. I think that will remain a very real threat for the foreseeable future. And I do think we'll need to build the architecture for DEXs, or privacy-focused DEXs, in the meantime, until we get to a point where it is too big to fail. And I am optimistic that we can achieve that, but we are on a tightrope right now. And I do think the privacy projects need to come together and work together and share resources. I don't just mean technical resource or social, but kind of like the social resource that we're sharing now, kind of coming together, right, sharing ideas, sharing vision, because that's actually about bringing people together. I maintain that currencies are social capital. The value of a currency is inherent in social. It is a unit of social capital, and the more valuable a currency is, that is simply a reflection of the value of social capital that it holds. And that is why, up to now, the US dollar has been the world's reserve currency, because it has, for the last at least 70 years, been the dominant cultural superpower of the world. And this is going to lead me to my sort of final point before I sort of kind of exit, is that the US has been the culturally dominant superpower, but we are in a period of change. And you've got big guys in big positions in big governments, including the US, saying we are living in a multipolar world. And a multipolar world is not the unipolar world that the US envisaged 20, 30 years ago, when the US government pursued a neoliberalist agenda quite openly to essentially keep the US as the dominant power. We are in a multipolar world, and what is implicitly, I feel, being said by that is an acknowledgement that the US dollar will no longer remain the reserve currency of the world. What I see with I'm going to call it the Binance acquisition by the United States government, because that's how I read it when I look at Binance reaching a plea deal with the US government, is, the optics to me is this is the acquisition of Binance by the US government. And I think it's actually really bullish for the price of Bitcoin. because one of my more cynical takes is, CryptoGuard asked me this privately. What do you think is going to happen to the price of Bitcoin now that Binance has submitted to US regulatory pressure or scrutiny a lot more? And I basically said to him, look, there are loads of private citizens in the US in very high and powerful backgrounds. Some of these people are blue bloods. Some of these people come from old money. There is a lot of wealthy libertarian blood that is deeply invested into Bitcoin, not just as a speculative currency, but as an idea. But they are invested in it as a speculative, and the people who are invested in it as a speculative currency want it to succeed and to grow. And I think if there is some acknowledgement that the USD is no longer the global currency, then I think what we've got to say is, well, what next? Why is the US bothering to pursue finance? Why, and my simple take is that I think the US is essentially going to siphon more and more liquidity from the US dollar into Bitcoin. I suspect that will occur. I look at the US debt, and I look at how US debt has grown. I look at concerns over the US dollar's debt in relation to its currency, and I can understand the concerns that some people have. But at the same time, I also look at what a significant chunk of that debt is being spent on, and a lot of it is being spent on renewables. And it looks to me, and I said to CryptoGuard, it looks like the US is pursuing a self-sufficiency agenda, an energy independence agenda. They've invested almost $1 trillion into developing renewables. And I think that's part of achieving energy independence and not being reliant on foreign oil exports. And I think if they're trying to do that, it means they're trying to cut away from Saudi. It means I think they're trying to cut away from Saudi and the UAE and the Middle East. And I think the consequence of that is because they want to be isolationist in a multipolar world. And I think Bitcoin will thrive in that scenario as digital gold. So what I've got to say there.
So I think we've already hit the 1 hour mark. Maybe we can open the floor to questions. And I also see like Veil projects also here as well.
Yeah, and there were a couple of questions, I believe, that came in before, including like CryptoGuard sent one about could each participant briefly highlight the key features or innovations in their respective projects that contribute to enhancing user privacy? How do these features differentiate your project in the broader landscape of privacy-focused cryptocurrencies? So, Ruben, would you like to talk about the key features and innovations of Firo?
Well, I think, while like Particle has been, focused on building like marketplaces and also basic swap DEX, PivX have been, all about doing like proof of stake masternode type of system in the Zcash sort of a ZK Snarks type of thing.
Right.
We have been really focused on, I would say, the actual protocol development. So that means like, we don't just use other people's cryptography. We build our stuff, and we've given birth to a whole new family of privacy protocols. And of course, people might ask to say, well, what's the point? Why do we need more privacy protocols? But the thing is that most other privacy protocols, they have weaknesses. And I'm not saying ours is perfect either, but I think that we're quite close to. Yeah, we're quite close to getting all the elements the boxes that you need to tick. Like it's trustless, very high anonymity, sender amount, privacy, everything, and especially as we're starting to see that, Monero's privacy may not be as good, as techniques develop. There needs to be better technology. I'm not saying that, Monero's technology is broken and whatnot, but it's an arms race, right? And we are one of those people that are building those arms, right? Right. And I feel that, one of the issues with Zcash is that they build amazing tech. Like their tech is like really groundbreaking stuff, even their stuff with Halo 2. But at the same time, they started becoming much less open about their research, and a lot of the stuff isn't very clear. It gets increasingly complex. I mean, I think, now, ZK starts with Graph 16, which is what, Private Chain and PIVX use, which is basically based on sapling, is much, much more well understood now. Of course, it has that trusted setup issue, but then if you start moving to Halo 2, it starts getting a lot more complicated and a lot more opaque. So we wanted to come and kind of create a new type of thing, which is not this general circuit that can prove all sorts of different things. We're building a modular privacy protocol. That means that as new tech comes up, we can upgrade certain components, which kind of make it future-proof. And because it is compartmentalized and modularized, we can analyze its security and know what everything is doing a lot simpler. So yeah, that's why I think why we are doing is important. Like, we're really at the very low level in the sense, like, like very close to building the foundations of privacy protocols. So yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And I actually am a big believer in diversity. I think what you're doing is awesome, and it's important to have a variety of techniques being used. And that's even part of like what we're putting together with multiple small privacy coins. It's that's a strength, is multiple techniques. I'd add PIVX, as you mentioned. It uses ZK snarks. It uses Zcash is like excellent technology. I think the trusted setup is there, but the trusted setup was solidly executed in my mind. I don't think that's a concern. So PIVX uses that. It combines it with proof of stake, as you mentioned, Ruben, which differentiates it from Zcash, which is proof of work, and that gives it a high anonymity set. Right, as opposed to one of the shortcomings of Monero, of course, is the anonymity set is just a collection under 20 possible sources for the input UTXO. I think another really important part of PIVX that contributes to its privacy, because it can tackle unknown events going forward, is its well-funded treasury. It has a DAO that's managed through masternodes, and that funds ongoing development that can pivot pretty quickly to address issues that come up. And I think that's an important part of its its privacy case as well. And that ongoing improvement, like there's lots of things that, just like Firo is continuing to improve, PIVX is too, with new mobile wallet capability and so forth, and all those. That would be the case.
Yeah, you guys really just keep on building, which is like, you guys had so much hiccups, and seeing you guys power through, and like, Firo and I and PIVX had bad history to begin with, and now, like, we're like,
we have
in this together.
Right.
Yeah. Right. So that's great. I really like it.
Yeah. Thanks. And let's see. I guess Dr. Cap had to step away, but you gave us.
I am actually still back.
Yes. Okay, great. Please.
But I may step away at any time. It's been good listening to you guys sort of talk about your respective technologies. I really respect that. As you sort of mentioned, that there'd been some various beefs in the time, but I think one of the nice things is when you get to meet everyone in person and kind of hang out, as I said before, social currency is kind of the underlying backer for, I think for fiat currency, and it's a cultural phenomena. I think our projects, by coming together, can grow and working together. And I just want to say it's really nice doing these with you, you and Ruben. And it's certainly like the little group where we have organizing. It's something I always look forward to. Can you hear me, by the way?
Yes, and agree. Okay. Agree.
Yeah.
Right.
Shout out to Leah for chasing us to do this. Yeah.
Yeah. It's always just like a good listen. For me, it's a really good listen, kind of hearing you guys talk. It is unfortunate we can get Ravaga to sort of talk a bit more about Zano and to participate because, yeah, I always think whenever I sort of see the guy, it's like Bullberry, and I think sort of 2015, I think 2016. I just remember, yeah, that's the guy who invented Bullberry, and that's the guy who did a lot of pioneering work with the crypto note protocol. And again, that going back, even Bullberry had some beefs with Monero back in the day, but Ravaga, he sort of really led some of the development on Xano, and again, to see Xano, Firo, PivX at Monerotopia with Monero guys, it's a real show that in the face of all the adversity that we're facing on a regulatory sphere, and the impact that that's having, that people are actually being very pragmatic and just coming together and realizing that we can't work as maxis because maximalist mindset is a socially eliminating phenomena, in my opinion. So thank you. I really want to thank you guys just for giving your time.
Oh, our pleasure.
I'm just wondering, should we open it up to questions from the floor?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Mm-hmm. There was one other pre-sent-in question. What will be the future of privacy coins, and will there be any decentralized solution for buying the privacy coin if centralized exchanges, privacy coin, if centralizes exchanges in their support? And I think we've been discussing that through this call, and there are good paths forward with decentralized exchanges.
Dr. Cup CBDCs.
Yeah. So those are all the pre questions. Yeah, we could.
Well, I mean, I'm definitely happy to open up to the floor. If anyone's got any hands, show them, and I'm happy to take questions before we sort of wind up.
Oh, well, AJ posted a thing. Call focus of Web3. Oh, I don't know what's all this. Yeah, some questions from Twitter. Do you want me to read it out? Maybe we'll answer two and then we call it a day. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So Mulan from Web3 Go says, core focus of Web3 has been on privacy, ownership of data, and individuals' data control. How does Particle PivX project guarantee top security of user data and ensure users have control over the data? Okay, forget that one. I think that's a bot. Okay, let's see. Experts believe mass adoption of cryptocurrencies cannot occur without meaningful privacy protections. Do you agree? What steps is Particle and PivX? How about Firo? Come on, didn't mention us. Taking to ensure people invest in Web3 privacy. There you go.
Oh. Yeah, Yen. And Ruben, yeah, I want your perspectives.
Well, I think it's a good point that word needs to get out there. I mean, it's like using transparent cryptocurrencies is actually giving more information away than using the bank, right? I mean, your neighbors can't see your bank statements and so forth. So to some degree, privacy coins are just returning us online to what we have in the real world with cash and, to a lesser degree with bank exchanges. And I don't think that all people realize that, but it's a good point that we need to keep getting the word out. It's not always that we're wanting some new super duper level of privacy. We just want the level of privacy that humanity has enjoyed in the physical world for all of its existence.
I mean, even if we don't totally agree, I mean, I love privacy, right? And I think it's really important. But, there are some people say, oh, privacy is for bad people and stuff like that. Even if you think like that, one thing that we see, we have to think what was cryptocurrency supposed to be, right? And I think one of the things that Peter Valkenburg, during a session on Congress, was saying is that cryptocurrencies are basically public payment infrastructure, right? In the same way that the internet is public infrastructure for information, right? And where, of course, there are some centralizing points, but internet is used for both good and bad, right? But it's like anyone can post on it, anyone can do anything on it, right? And similarly, we have lacked, a way for payments and money as a public global infrastructure. It's always been controlled by the government, kept in silos and stuff like that. And for that to actually be meaningful and for it to actually happen, you definitely need some sort of privacy protection, or else you'll be able to be censored, you'll be able to distinguish this and that. And you can't have a global payment infrastructure if someone can say, shut this down, shut that down, which is actually, kind of already semi happening in Ethereum space, right? And which is kind of, that whole Vitalik's privacy pool idea where you have to prove that you're innocent, which is horrible, but a subject that we've already dealt with in the last thing. But so I just, don't forget that what we're trying to do. I mean, yes, Dogecoin, Shiba Inu is like all really fun, but what was cryptocurrency was made for. And I feel that sometimes, although I'm cheering for Bitcoin all the way, this is something that Bitcoin maxis sometimes miss, right? They have been, they're doing is the laser eye stuff, but then embracing shitty custodial lightning solutions and not being honest with themselves of where Bitcoin can improve, and just saying, it's treating it like the freaking Bible and that it will never change and it's perfect as it is, and yet introduce stupid things like Taproot, which then led to ordinals, and everyone's like, yeah, it's all a clusterfuck, right? So I would anyway. I'm on a rant mode, so I will end.
That's agreed. Good point.
I mean, I've got an optimistic take as on this as always. I think you're right. Cryptocurrency is currency, and currency is used for buying and selling goods and services. So for me, it's part of the reason I'm such a big fan of the particle marketplace conceptually and in practice, is that this idea that you can buy and sell real world goods online without giving up any personal information using privacy coins. That's a mind-blowing concept, and using privacy-based cryptocurrencies. So it's a platform that supports cryptocurrency for its usage as a currency as opposed to being a spec instrument. And I think that is an incredibly powerful tool. And to me, I look at 11. I look at I kind of look at where we're all going together. I look at the work we're doing with Basic Swap, but I also look at the work that's happening with the marketplace and just thinking, yeah, we're going to integrate multi-currency support one way or another. And that means, using Firo to buy real world goods and using PivX to buy and sell real world goods, and any other privacy-based cryptocurrency that we integrate into our marketplace. That is going to have game-changing implications globally for e-commerce, and that's going to draw people in. And that's going to make people use this, and this is going to make liquidity within privacy coins grow. And I think the more you try to force surveillance universally, the more people who don't want to be surveilled and people who understand the adverse implications of that, how they will turn away and find solutions like the ones that we are collectively building. So that's my optimistic take on that.
Yep, I like that.
If it's okay with you, I am going to have to check out. So I just want to say thank you, Yen, and thank you, Ruben, so much for hosting me today. And, obviously, I look forward to doing this again with you guys sometime soon once we get the right sort of date and topic lined up. So once again, thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for hosting. Good discussion.
Thank you. Good night, guys. Bye.
Bye.